Look at this face. Why should this be under whiteface? I mean, really.
KISS's new look hasn't hurt record sales. Their latest album, Lick It Up, is the group's 16th gold album.
This is a huge world record, and the concerts are going better than ever. They're coming back up. We were in a slump a little while ago, but so what, folks? We're back. Boom.
Lick It Up was released and immediately tripled the sales of Creatures of the Night. It went platinum, and we were soon filling up concert halls again. This was clearly a new lease on life.
And all of a sudden you're selling 1 million records. Well, you're obviously in a slump, but most groups don't sell 1 million records, so it depends on what perspective you look at it.
You know, it's all about money with those guys.
What Gene's saying is really true, because when we were selling our least amount of records and people were talking about this being a ship that was sinking, we were selling 1 million records or more. So everybody should have it that tough.
I also realized that as soon as the record came out, I would no longer have that separation to cushion the impact, positive and negative, of success. The person who was famous would be the same one as the guy walking down the street, but that could be fun, too. I was going to be much more recognizable and visible, so in that sense it couldn't be bad, especially when it came to getting women. And anyway, I'd had years of adapting to fame, and all those years in makeup had provided a transition. So it wasn't going to be like diving into a pool of ice water.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
Up to that point, MTV had always ignored us. We had filmed one of those "I Want My MTV" promos, and they never aired it. The video we had shot for Creatures, "I Love It Loud," didn't get played. They chose not to give us any exposure, even though we desperately needed it in the wake of the Elder debacle to show that we had recommitted ourselves to doing what KISS did best.
Makeup is something that we added as a dressing, as something special. 10 feet into the audience, you can't see the makeup at all.
I wasn't sick of the makeup, I was sick of what it had become. We had to give it up to save what we loved most, the band. This was exciting and liberating too. I relished the chance to prove ourselves all over again, not just to critics and the audience, but also to myself.
You've been accused of having bad taste, being lousy musicians and worshipping the devil, being Nazis and God knows what.
We've been called everything.
It's true, isn't it?
We don't have bad taste, we taste good. If you don't like what we do, then turn the channel. You don't have to watch us.
But the important thing is that everybody else likes what we do.
The more critics don't like us, the more the fans like us.
Yeah?
I know Star Wars all over America was panned, that it was childish and it wasn't serious, but people don't care about that. They want good entertainment.
Climb out the window and come see the band. We're good for you. Your parents, crazy.
Incidentally, why are you wearing more makeup than I am?
Still, Kiss Unmasking made a great soundbite and people bought into it. We managed to turn that into something of an event and get press out of it. And it worked. I was convinced that Lick It Up wasn't as good as Creatures of the Night, but the album sold way, way better. Probably 4 or 5 times as many albums sold in just the first few weeks after its release in September 1983. It wasn't the music the people hadn't liked, it was how the band had looked.
After we took off our makeup and embraced the MTV age, the crowd changed dramatically. Back in the early days, we had started off with a bizarre crowd, opening for other bands, and KISS was perceived as a dangerous band of rock metal rebels. When we became more mainstream, the toys and the games brought us a very young crowd.
What's going on? Oh, I can't wait to see KISS.
At some point, Mom and Dad would show up with their 3-year-old kids. It became like the circus. The 1980s brought us yet another shift. Suddenly, we were popular with teenage girls. They came to the show. They screamed. And sometimes they seemed to want to do more than just scream. Some of them were clearly groupies in training. For the record, I should say that I never went after the underage ones. Oh no! Enough legal age girls were showing up. Yeah! But these young girls would come backstage. They were always around. I would walk into my room, and usually there'd be a girl there.
Once we took off the makeup, we no longer wore the platform boots on stage, and we adopted a more generic style, tight, colorful clothes, sexual and flamboyant. We slid into what was pretty much the common look at the time. We just kind of morphed into what became known as a hair band.
I think people see basically that it made no difference whatsoever in the concerts. The concerts are at least as energetic as they were. They're a lot of fun. The music's heavier than it was.
Hair bands were dominant because they gave younger teenagers, and especially younger girls, access to a kind of rock music that had been considered too dangerous for them before. Girls who were only 13 and 14 were having their first brushes with sexuality, and for their early crushes, they were turning to these hair metal bands, to Bon Jovi, to Poison. As it turned out, we had one band member who was perfectly suited for this transition, Paul Stanley. He was at home being that kind of frontman, dancing on the stage.
We were going to have to find out whether we were a good enough band to exist without the makeup. If what people always said about us was true, that we were a gimmick, then I felt it was time to call it a day because we didn't deserve to continue. Was I nervous? Not really. I knew that what I did was from the heart, whether or not my face was white. It had become innate. I was going to continue to be exactly the same character. We looked like dozens of other bands. There was no place anymore to be different. We had gotten rid of our calling card. We had taken off what made us different, so pretty much all we could look like was a run-of-the-mill rock and roll band.
You know, those guys, they change like the weather, you know.
MTV had opened up the opportunity for a band from Idaho to look like a band from LA, which could look like a band from London. There was a more homogenized look because every band suddenly realized they could go buy hairspray and tease their hair up high and wear their mom's makeup and roll around on the floor with their guitars, just like they saw in somebody's video.
Wow.
It was the current state of bands: big hair, spandex, jewelry, femme makeup. A lot of bands with that look made a lot of awful music. It's mind-boggling how bad some of that stuff was. It had no soul, no roots.
What?
Most of the hair bands were horrible, with noodling guitar players tapping away without really being able to play. But we had to fit in with what was going on, so we did.
Wow.
And for better or worse, it got us through a couple of decades.
Eric Carr must have felt as if the ground were moving under him every time he took a step. He was thrilled to join the Kiss he knew and loved, but the first record he played on was a concept album. The second was Creatures of the Night. Then with the third record he played on, Kiss took off the makeup.
Since MTV had covered our unmasking, we figured that this time around they would probably play a music video if we made one. We weren't going to get a world premiere slot or anything, but we were hopeful it would get played. The video for Lick It Up was a bigger production than I Love It Loud, but we managed to keep the costs fairly low. Some artists were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on videos at the time, and that seemed crazy to us, especially in light of MTV's track record of not playing us in the past. We wanted to make Lick It Up for a reasonable amount of money. The video opened with an image of skulls, and if you watch very closely, you'll see one of them wobble a little. They were made out of latex. We shot the video in a burned-out area of the Bronx. Aside from a few props like the skulls, that was all real. We didn't do anything but show up. It looked like Dresden in 1945, a post-apocalyptic wasteland. But it wasn't a stage set. I'd never seen anything like that before. I hadn't spent much time in the South Bronx. The crazy thing was that it wasn't just one small area. It was huge, like an entire bombed-out city or a massive movie set. Broken down and decaying buildings as far as you could see, piles of bricks and rocks and garbage everywhere. It was the weirdest, most surreal thing I'd ever seen. When I saw the complete edited video, I thought it was cool. It was an MTV video. It had girls, it had fire, it had weird hairdos. It had all the things MTV videos had. Eric hated it because he had these little drumstick legs, so he's walking and you see these little feet with high-pointed shoes and these thick legs. And people seeing Vinnie asked, "Is that a girl?"
What?
When we shot the cover for Lick It Up, Vinnie wore a wig and it looked great. Afterwards, he gave us a hard time and insisted on not wearing it again. But then his hair kind of looked like the Gerber baby. He was very odd looking anyway, and in that video he looked extra odd as he tried to look sexy for the camera.
But they're also increasingly important to older, more established acts who are just trying to stay alive. In his special report, Video Music Mania, Ed Miller sees how veteran rockers like KISS make it to the TV screen.
Playback!
This is the basement of an empty Manhattan warehouse, and you're watching the big guys putting together a video. Even though KISS has had 12 gold albums, the assemblage of this video is critical if they are to stay competitive.
I think what video has done is made bands aware that it's not enough just to play.
There was 24-hour round-the-clock shooting at this location, plus another 12 hours of shooting at another location, plus almost a week's worth of editing before this project was finished. Final price tag, $50,000.
To try to sort of outdo the song is to ultimately defeat the purpose of the video, which is to put the song across.
Why are your performances so violent?
We are not violent, we are energetic.
Lick It Up went on to be certified double platinum. That blew Creatures of the Night away and reaffirmed for me that my suspicions had been correct. It wasn't that people didn't want KISS, they wanted KISS to drop something that no longer seemed genuine. Losing the makeup forced people to focus on the band, and they embraced the music. Lick It Up felt like a rebound in other ways too, because shedding the makeup meant, in a sense, shedding an era, shedding a persona, and finally being out there, at least on the surface, as me. The person who was off stage was the same person in the videos. I felt that we had taken one very big step forward. The next test would be playing live without makeup. Were we just a bunch of knuckleheads in spandex and grease paint who blew shit up? Or were we a band, able to go toe-to-toe with anybody else? We were about to find out.